And now, a public service announcement from Charlie. Charlie, what do you gotta do? Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. on our way in. There's a tournament series going on all this week. I don't really play tournaments. Also, the tournaments go all day, and because I have to pick up Charlie, there's no way I can play any of them. But as a result, the cash games are juicy, as they always are, really. Anyway, there was one thing that I wanted to get into. There's a channel that I've been watching recently that I've absolutely love. It's Ryan DePaulo, Degenerate Gambler. As it sounds, there's a bit of degenning in there, some slot play. What I really love about it is I'm originally from New York, and it just kind of reminds me of the people I had seen growing up. That personality. I think the channel's funny. It's obviously that's its motivation. I think he does a good job of entertaining. At the same time, there's some of the stuff he does that I don't agree with, some slot play and things like that, but I think it's just a fun channel overall. So I'm going to link that in the description as well as up here somewhere. So check that out. Like I said, I think it's really funny. His latest video, he actually played I think it was a Borgata tournament, and I don't want to spoil it, so check it out. Pretty funny. And that's about it. I'm gonna head in and play some standard 1K cap, 3-5 no limit. Maybe there'll be a bigger game that starts early. Tuesdays are generally PLO, so unless PLO starts early, I won't be playing PLO. I probably also won't be playing PLO unless the game is really good and just looks juicy. But I've been doing really well at the 1K cap 3-5, so I think I'm gonna stick with that for a bit and ride it out. All right, guys, catch you later. Today, there was some street poker being played. Straight street poker. All right, let's get into some of these hands. There are a number of them. Pretty early on in the session, I get ace-king in early position. I open to 25 after one limper. There's a caller to my left, and now the player to his immediate left makes it 125. Folds back to me. He's playing 300. He's generally pretty tight. I don't see him get out of line very often. So part of me wants to just fold, figuring, whatever, I'm probably flipping at best. But I'm tired of folding ace-king. I've been doing it way too much on this vlog. He's got $300. Let's flip. I put it in for 300. The player in between folds. The player who 3-bet calls. Board runs out like 10, 7, 5. Turns with 2 diamonds. Turns a queen. River's like a 4. So I don't beat like anything. I don't beat even ace-queen anymore, which would be like the other hand that's 3-betting pre-flop. I table my hand, and he's just like, how did I miss? I'm like, how did you miss? He ends up mucking. He says he had ace-jack of diamonds, so he flopped like the nut flush draw and then missed. I guess every day they're surprising me, man. These nits keep 3-betting hands that I just wouldn't think that they're 3-betting. I'm rather surprised that this guy's 3-betting me with ace-jack. But I mean, I guess, given how I've been playing as of late, people are just starting to 3-bet hands for value that they think are just going to be the best hand. I don't know, but I'm beginning to think that I could just never fold ace-king anymore and just get it in for like 200 big blinds all the time. Yeah, that's the new plan. I should probably call this episode the ace-king episode because I got it a bunch to start off the session. I get ace-king again after one limper. I make it 25, and it goes call, the button calls, the blinds call, and the limper calls, I think, or one of the blinds call. Anyway, we go 5 ways to a flop, which comes queen 4-5 with 2 clubs. Checks to me. There's one act behind me. Obviously, I could just check give up here, but I'm not a fan of this. There is some percentage of time I'm just going to give up. But I think when the blinds are calling here and the limper is calling, their ranges are going to be super, super wide. The only way that a hand can continue, I think, against my continuing multi-barrel range is going to be a hand like ace-queen or king-queen. And I just don't think that there's enough combinations of this, given that I have the king in my hand. Also, having the ace of clubs in my hand is another great blocker in this situation to know that I'm not going to be facing the nut flush draw, which I think in a lot of times is going to raise me off of my own equity with ace-king high. I decided to bet 70 to 125, and the button is the only caller. We go heads up to a turn, which is an offsuit king. At this point, obviously, I could be betting for value, but I decide to check for deception. I think much of his calling range of a queen is going to be folding here to my barrel. So if I do bet again, the only real hand that I think can continue is possibly ace-queen. Otherwise, I expect lots of folds. Obviously, I can bet to protect my equity against the flush draws, but my plan here really was to check jam against this individual player if he were to bet. Unfortunately, he checks it back. The river is now an offsuit 7, and I decided at this point that his most likely holdings are going to be missed flush draws as well as queens that want to get to showdown. So I decided to kind of bomb for value. I bet 235, looking to get hero called by his hands like ace queen, queen jack. Similarly, if he ends up having a hand like king x of clubs for turning top pair, I don't think that's a hand that's ever going to fold either. Looking back on the situation, maybe it's better to either go for a smaller bet or possibly to check to induce him to bluff his own missed clubs. Anyway, he ends up jamming for 360 more. Puke. So one thing I want to get into here is this theory that I have, which I think is a very genius theory, that generally speaking, people don't bluff raise the river. And similarly, when you raise the river, most people who bet for value don't like folding. So I guess to look at this in multiple components, originally what I had kind of seen most of the time when I'm playing poker is that when there's a raise on the river, almost always the person just has it. No one really bluff raises the river. So my initial thought was, well, if nobody bluff raises the river, I should be doing it a ton more. So I started bluff raising the river to just too high of a frequency. Every time I thought my opponent was weak, value betting some top pair, one pair kind of hand, I would raise. And then it turns out I was getting called a ton. People just hate bet folding the river, especially if they're betting for value. So let's say they have a hand like ace king on some king, queen, jack, 3-4 board, and you could just kind of tell that they don't have some monstrous hand. I would attack these ranges a ton, and I would always get looked up. And I was just like, wow, I just know that he has some one pair type holding, and I would expect him to fold it in this situation. So it was an interesting kind of dichotomy in that though I felt like nobody ever bluff raises the river, similarly there was no point in me doing it to some excessive amount, because whenever people bet the river and you think they're betting for value, they hate folding. So back to this hand, I find myself in that situation. I don't think that he's bluffing me on the river, but at the same time, I really thought I had the best hand. So I'm trying to figure out what combinations of hands I'm losing to. The one that I really think of is specifically 6-8 of clubs, which rivers the nuts straight. Other than that, I can't really think of too many combinations that I'm losing to. I would expect king queen to be betting the turn, obviously to protect against the flush draw. Looking back from the previous session where I ended up hero folding my aces in a very similar situation where I had bombed the river and gotten raised. So here I am once again on the river in a situation where I feel like people just don't bluff raise the river often enough. And I pose to you the question, what do? Are you calling here with top pair, top kicker when you're betting for value and end up getting raised? I think it's a pretty sticky situation. I'd love to hear exactly what you would do in this spot. I think about it for quite some time, and ultimately I come up to the decision that people don't bluff raise the river often enough. Even though I'm getting a great price to be calling here, I don't think I'm going to be winning often enough. So I kind of tank, fold, and he excitedly throws over the 6-9 of clubs for 9 high. Yeah, I guess he decided to turn his 6 blocker into a straight blocker. Figured I'm not going to have a big enough hand here once I bomb this river to be calling this raise, even though it's a small raise. All right, well, now that we've got you here, are you feeling like an expert? Do you think oh yeah, of course I would have called. Oh, it's such a gross spot. What an idiot. I think it's really easy to be results oriented, to hear about things, especially on video format, and immediately think, yeah, well, that's stupid. That's dumb. I would have folded. Oh yeah, I would have called. Obvious. Let's now get into the video of what actually happened, and I'd love to hear, if you ended up being tricked, would you have decided otherwise? Have you now changed your mind given hearing an opposite side of this story? I hate it. I feel like I'm losing, but after folding those aces, I'm not in any mood to fold, and I feel like really all he's representing here is specifically 6-8 of clubs. I call, and he ends up having kind of another hand I didn't really think of, is King 7 of clubs for hitting runner 2 pair. Pretty gross and frustrating, obviously, because if the river's a brick, I'm getting paid off of my $235 bet instead. I could have just bet the turn. He's obviously not folding, and in that case on the river, we're just getting it all in anyway. Could I have avoided the situation by like checking the flop and maybe if he bets folding? Sure, but the other situation to look at is if I did check this flop and he bets and now I fold, I'm folding to King 7 of clubs, which is just a flush draw. So I guess maybe the lesson here is people really don't bluff raise the river, especially when it's kind of a smallish raise. I don't know. I think it's just a really gross spot. I couldn't think of like hands that I specifically lose to that check back this turn and then shove this river. There's like just exactly 2 combinations of 6-8 of clubs and I guess King 7 of clubs, maybe 6-3 of clubs. I expect 6-3 of clubs to raise the flop because it is an open-ended straight and flush draw. So it just really sucks. I mean, maybe when people are betting what is a very defined range, they're just going to end up having it. Unfortunate situation. I don't know if there's much else I could have done other than possibly not betting this flop. And now we are on to the 3rd straight hand history in a row with Ace King. There is an early position opener to 20. The player is probably one of the tighter players in this game, although he's actually young, so he's like a good young type player. So it's not a situation where it's like some old man nit, but rather a guy whose game I respect. I have Ace King suited. The players that are in the blinds are specifically the 2 guys that are action players who I want in the pot. One is the one with the King 7 of clubs, even though I think he's still a pretty good player. And the other player is another guy who used to be one of the bigger whales in the casino, although he's gotten significantly better. So I think I prefer flatting here as opposed to just 3-betting the early position nit open. What I'm going to find here when I 3-bet, either I'm going to win the blinds or I'm going to find myself in a spot against like a guy who has like a tight range anyway. So I like to call, and we end up going 5 ways to a flop. Sure enough, the blinds call, which is exactly what I wanted. We end up going 5 ways to a flop, which comes King, Queen of spades, and an offsuit 4. Goes check, check. He bets 60 into 100. I call. Not in love with the situation because I'm not really sure there's many hands that I beat that are in his value range once he bets this flop. Maybe it's hands like Ace Jack of spades, Jack 10 of spades, things of that nature. But other than that, maybe King Jack suited, but I don't even know if he opens that, this specific player. So I call the 60. Everybody else folds. We go to a turn of an offsuit 9. Now he checks. I think this is a perfect spot to just be checking back. Again, I don't think there are hands that I need to protect against. Maybe some flush draws, but I think if I bet, I'm only getting called by hands that either have great equity, like the Ace Jack or Jack 10, like the Ace Jack of spades, the Ace 10 of spades. So I check it back. River is an offsuit ace, so I make top 2, and now he bets 150. I hate it because, like I said, this guy's a nit. I've obviously underrep my hand, so I can't really be folding. So I think, it's a mandatory call. The real question is, should I be raising for value? And I think against the nit, there's just no reason to be raising. I'm going to be folding out his bluffs, and I don't think I can get called by worse. Maybe ace-queen, but I don't see ace-queen betting this flop 5 ways. It's just not something that I would expect, especially on a flush draw board. I think he might check call a bet. So I flat, and we get shown the bad news. He has pocket 4s for a flop bottom set. Obviously opening a little wider than I would expect him to. I wouldn't expect him necessarily to open pocket 4s. But at the same time, I think flatting here is my best decision on the river. At this point, after these couple of hands that I've lost, I think I'm stuck around $800 or $900 in this game. It's not that great, in my opinion. I kind of can't get anything going. I look behind me and notice there is a player who is action, and I figure, it's just time for a table change of scenery. Hopefully, with my last hour and a half of play, we can get some hands in against this guy and change things up. So in this hand, the pre-flop opener is the action player. He opens to 20. I'm on the button with 7-6 suited. Obviously, I could be 3-betting to isolate, but he is an action player. He likes getting out of line, doing crazy things, so I don't exactly want to be playing some massive pot with 7 high against a guy who just doesn't like folding. I'd much rather just try to make a hand or play a hand post-flop where I think I'm going to have the best hand. So I call, and the big blind calls as well. We go 3 ways to a flop of Jack 6-4 with 2 diamonds. It goes check, check to me. When I flop second pair here and it goes check, check to me, I think I'm going to have the best hand a lot. I want to protect my equity against overcards. I bet $40 and both the blind and the original opener calls. When the original opener calls here, I think he's going to have some like just random ace highs a lot. Maybe ace king, ace queen, king queen, things of that nature. Maybe with the ace of diamonds for the running nut flush. So the turn is now the 10 of diamonds and the flush gets there. The small blind checks, the pre-flop opener checks, and when it goes check, check to me, I notice that the small blind is kind of uninterested. He's on his phone, and he looks like he's already like folding. So I can already tell he doesn't have a flush. Given that the pre-flop opener didn't see bet this flop, I don't think he's going to have a flush draw himself very often. He's a pretty aggressive player. I don't think he's ever just going to show up here with a flush draw that's checking this flop. So I decided to just go for it. I bet 105, expecting the small blind to fold a lot and expecting the pre-flop opener to have some like ace, king, king, queen, 1 diamond cards, 1 diamond in his hand range that is possibly going to be calling this value bet of mine with just 2 overs and like a flush draw, as well as maybe just folding out some of his overcard equity. Sure enough, he calls. So at this point, I'm putting him like squarely on having like 2 overs and like a flush draw, like 1 diamond. And now he checks dark, which is super strange. You see people do this sometimes when they have draws and they want to like make it look like they don't have a draw. It's really weird. I don't really know what he's doing. The river is an offsuit 8. And so now the question is whether I want to turn my hand into a bluff, turn the 6 into a bluff. I don't think it's necessary. If he has a jack, I don't expect him to fold, this guy especially. And if he has the hands that I expect him to have, like ace, king, king, queen, things of that nature with like 1 diamond, I'm beating that hand anyway. So I check back, and he ends up having 7-8 of clubs for a flopped gut shot, a turned double belly buster that could be no good if I have a flush, and then he rivers an 8. This pot, it was pretty rage-inducing because I just can't believe that he's calling the second barrel of 105 here with the 7-8, and more importantly that he gets there. Obviously the 7's no good because I'd be making 2 pair. The straights could be no good if I have a flush myself. It was just pretty frustrating, especially since he checks dark, and if he makes like a straight, he doesn't even get to realize his equity by getting any value bets in. Just a really, really frustrating hand against this guy. As I mentioned, we were playing some street poker. After this hand, I ended up getting involved in a couple more really ridiculous hands against this guy. We kind of went back and forth. Nothing like particularly. I did get him in a pot where I 3-bet him with ace 10. The flop came like ace deuce 5, and I decided to basically go for a check call off against his what I think is going to be just a large bluffing range. Sure enough, he bet the flop. I called. Turn was an offsuit 10, and he ended up betting like his last 240 of his 340. I put him in, and he called off. River's a brick, and then he showed me that he had an ace, trying to imply like I got lucky turning 10. There's no way I got lucky. He did not have ace jack or ace queen or ace king because he would have shown it. So I ended up stacking him there. Anyway, kind of went back and forth with this player. Ended up losing a total of like 450 on the day. Not awful, not great. Obviously, just had a series of kind of unfortunate hands and interesting spots. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, today was kind of a weird day. I felt like I was zigging and zagging a ton. Every time I called or got involved in some situation, I'd lose. And then every time that I'd fold in some like close spot, I would have ended up making the winner or something like that. So rather unfortunate. Not sweating it too much. Tomorrow we get back into the streets. All right, guys. Thanks for checking it out. Have a good night.